So I want to tell you about this guitar. A guitar that I most recently realized I might not fully appreciate. You see, this all started a couple months ago when I decided I wanted to study Oasis for the first time. I'd listened to a little bit of their music, like the big hits, but I had never taken the true deep dive into finding out what actually made Noel so special of a player. And I didn't just want to go surface level, I wanted to find out about all of the aspects of his craft, his playing, his tone, his licks, and also his gear. And this is where things got really interesting, because once I actually started to watch different live performances and studio recordings, I began to realize Noel is not necessarily what a lot of people would define as a one guitar type of guy. I mean, depending on the era, Noel could have been slinging Sheratons, Les Pauls, heck, he was even using Tellys at one point, but the one guitar that seemed to stick out to me more than any of the rest was actually this one semi-hollow in particular. But this wasn't just any semi-hollow guitar. This was a Gibson ES355, a guitar so special, in fact, that at one point, once I started researching it, Noel described it as his favorite guitar that he bought throughout the entirety of the 90s, which was arguably when him and his band were at like the height of their powers. And that really excited me for one reason in particular, because I actually had that guitar. Well, it was a little bit different because this was the Epiphone version, but I still did have the Epiphone version of this guitar, and I had even made a video about it when I had first got it about 10 months ago. And that being said, once I pulled it out of this case, I was super excited to play it, to practice with it every day while I did this study for these tones. And as I'm strumming these first few chords, I began to realize that this thing right here is really not in playing shape. I mean, although the guitar still looks stunningly and nothing was wrong with it visually, it was gonna need a little TLC if it was gonna be useful for this project. So I decided to drive it down to the local guitar store and get a setup. So I put the guitar back in the case, throw it in my car, and drive down to the local guitar store. And the second I take it out of the case and show it to the tech, he goes, "Oh brother, this thing is beautiful." And I'm like, "Oh, I know." And I say to him, "Can you take care of this thing for me?" He goes, "Absolutely. It'll be done in about 2 weeks." So I leave the guitar with him and I head back home. So 2 weeks pass and me and my brother discover the new Avatar. Okay, you see, I was just checking. I was just making sure you're still paying attention. Anyways, 2 weeks pass and I get a call, and it's from the guys at the store, and they're telling me that the guitar is finally done, which was like perfect timing because I was just ready to record the final part of this project. So I hop in my car and I head over there. As I walk into the store, I beeline it to the tech station. I tell him, "I left my 355 here a couple weeks ago. You guys told me it was ready." He's like, "Oh, okay, that's your guitar?" He then takes it out of his case and he's like, "Before you leave, just take a few strums, make sure it's set up right." And without even plugging it in, as soon as I'm playing my first few licks, I can tell this thing feels like an entirely different guitar. I mean, this thing feels absolutely amazing. So I thank the tech for his time, throw the case back in my car, and head back home and start playing and recording with it. And every time I do, I start recognizing instantly, with every note and every chord that I play, just how good this thing feels. It's like I'm reminded about it for the first time again. I mean, I had completely forgotten just how good this stinking guitar was. So much so that about a month later, when I was also doing a different project on Noel Gallagher, except for this time it wasn't necessarily about the playing or the licks. This time it was all about the tone. And this time I wanted to get as specific and as particular as I ever had when it came to like tone matching an artist. I mean, I was playing different tube amps at the same time, A-Bing them separately, playing them as loud as I ever had in this room, while also worrying about different variables and different settings. But all throughout all of these changes, the one thing that I consistently noticed wasn't changing, the one tool that was staying the same, was always this 355. I was using it on every single tone and song that I was trying to recreate, and every time I did, I felt myself getting more and more comfortable with how it felt and how it sounded. So much so that a week later, when I started to ask myself a very specific question that I hadn't ever asked myself before, This guitar was the only answer that came to mind, because I had often asked myself which guitar was the most underrated, but I had never found myself asking the question, which guitar was the most underappreciated? And not only did that guitar stick out, but there were three very specific reasons why it did, and the third just might catch you off guard like it did me. So the first way that I took this guitar for granted has a lot to do with how they actually constructed this thing, both build-wise and visually. You see, this is an Epiphone. More specifically, it's part of a line that they dropped a couple years back called the Inspired by Gibson Custom. And since getting this guitar, I've gotten to try one of the other models, the Les Paul, and even put it up against the real deal Les Paul standard and really liked how they fared. But that, in my mind, even though I liked it, just couldn't compare to this thing. And construction-wise, it had way more to do with just what they put in these, because they both had the custom buckers and the 12-inch radius, but once it got to the actual looks visually, that's what put this thing over the edge for me. And it started with the binding on the body going all the way up to the headstock and just how pronounced those details actually were. Strictly in terms of looks, I was very ready to say that this is the best looking Epiphone guitar I have ever seen in my life. And to even take it a step further, this was the first time ever that I had seen an Epiphone and I went back and forth with a Gibson just on looks, and I said, I think I might like this better. Like, I know the 355s from Gibson, they're 5 times the price for a reason, and they probably have a lacquered finish that's more expensive, but this Epiphone headstock right here, this sets it apart from all of the other semi-hollows and from all of the other Epiphones. I love this. But the visuals, of course, weren't the only thing that I realized I didn't fully appreciate about this guitar. And to show you number 2, well, we're actually gonna have to plug this thing in. So reason number 2 is the tone, and this was probably the least surprising thing about all of this, because from day one, like the moment I started actually playing this thing, it was very clear how good it sounded. However, I don't think I really recognized the full capabilities until I took it outside of like the null tone searching context and outside of the few things that I was doing with it before. Mainly because a couple months ago, I got called in because of an emergency to do the first gig I've done in almost a year, like my first time playing live, and I decided to take this guy, just kind of because of a whim, and I had just had it set up, and it was outside of the context that I'd usually been using this before, and this thing absolutely shined. And it kind of really started with a middle position, something that I really hadn't taken full advantage of, especially when it comes to 2-pickup guitars, until I started playing Les Pauls, especially when it came to the lead tone. My initial thought after finding out how much I loved the lead tones with the middle position was that once I got to the bridge position, those were going to be the times where I really pushed and wanted that extra oomph. And that was still the case, but I found that some of my favorite sounds from the bridge actually weren't when I was doing the full lead thing. A lot of it was when I was backing off the gain a little bit and getting some of these bridge position rhythm tones. those were just the newer ways that I was using it. I'm like an 80% of the time neck pickup guy, and I already knew what that sounded like. Now, reason number 3 is where things got really interesting and the most surprising of all to me, because it had nothing to do with the looks or even the tone of the guitar. It actually had everything to do with how I was noticing other people reacting to it. Now, obviously, if I like a guitar, I don't care what anyone else thinks. But it was really interesting to notice one particular time when I invited a friend over to just hang out and play some guitars. And this friend in particular, I know, before he even picked up this guitar, was going to be like, that is an Epiphone, that sucks, I don't want to play it. The name on the headstock means a lot to this dude. So we get in the room, he sits on the couch, I give him the guitar, I hand it to him, he starts playing it, and he's like, dude, this thing is like amazing. This is an Epiphone? I'm like, yes, this guitar is amazing. And I was, or at least this guitar was able to convince a guy who under normal circumstances would hate all of these guitars to love this guy right here. So at the end of the day, what's the moral of this story and what did we learn? And I think it's to say this: there's a difference between underrated and underappreciated. And I don't think if I came out and said there's another Epiphone that sounds pretty good or gets close to a Gibson, that would necessarily surprise anybody. They know about this brand. It's one of the biggest brands in the world. But I think sometimes, even though a guitar isn't necessarily underrated, I just realized that this guitar specifically, because of how much use I've gotten out of it, especially in contexts that I didn't necessarily expect more recently, I take this thing for granted sometimes. But I don't think it matters what I think. What matters is what you think. So please let me know, what is the guitar you feel like in your rig right now is the most underappreciated? What do you take for granted? And if you've played a 355, like an actual one, maybe if you've played this guitar as well, where do you think the compromises actually are that I might have missed out on? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I would usually tell you something like I've been meaning to talk about this guitar for a while, but with all of the Oasis content that I've been doing, I didn't necessarily think I would make another video about this guitar, but once I realized again how much I take this thing for granted, I was like, okay, it's time to get another 355 video out. But if you want to know anything more about the 355, I got this one from the homies at Sweetwater. The links are in the description. Make sure to check it out. It's one of the best ways to support the channel if that's something you want to do. Or if you're just curious about any of the other gear that I use in this video, like the Quad Cortex or any of the mics that we use, cameras, anything, make sure to check out those links. Also, thank you so much to all of my patrons. There's some extra exclusive content on there if you want to join the community. Like and subscribe if you had a good time. And most importantly, most important of all, have a fantastic night.